The rain had that metallic smell tonight, copper mixed with gasoline and something rotten from the dumpsters behind Romano's. I pressed my back against the brick wall, my server apron soaked through, clinging to my ribs like a second skin. My fingers trembled as I counted the crumpled bills from my tips. $43. Not even enough to cover the late fee on my rent, let alone the electricity bill that had turned from white to pink to final notice red. I should have gone home. Should have walked the 12 blocks to my studio apartment, locked the door, and pretended tomorrow would be different, but I didn't. Because 3 weeks ago, I'd seen him. Dante Moretti. Even his name tasted dangerous on my tongue, like dark chocolate laced with something forbidden. I'd been clearing table 7 when he walked into Romano's with 2 men flanking him like shadows. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Not obviously, but in that subtle way where conversations dipped lower, where eyes found their plates with sudden interest. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. And when he moved, it was with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the world would bend before you broke. I'd spilled water on his table. My hands had been shaking from a double shift, and the pitcher had slipped. The liquid had spread across the white tablecloth in a slow, damning puddle, and I'd frozen, waiting for anger, for dismissal, for whatever punishment girls like me got when they inconvenienced men like him. But he'd just looked at me, really looked. His eyes were the color of espresso, dark and impossibly deep, and for 3 seconds that stretched into infinity, I'd forgotten how to breathe. Then he'd smiled, barely, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, and said, "Careful, Angel. You might drown." His voice had been low, textured like velvet dragged over gravel, and it had burrowed under my skin and stayed there. For 3 weeks I'd replayed that moment. The way his jaw had tightened when I'd apologized, the way his fingers had drummed once against the table, a gold ring catching the candlelight, the way his security had watched me like I was a threat, even though I was just a broke 24-year-old with student debt and a chronic case of bad luck. I'd started asking about him, carefully. Maria, the head waitress, had gone pale when I mentioned his name. "You stay away from Dante Moretti," she'd hissed, gripping my wrist hard enough to bruise. "That man is the devil dressed in Armani, you hear me? The devil." But I'd never been good at listening to warnings. So tonight, I stood in the rain outside Sapphire, the exclusive lounge 3 blocks from Romano's, because I'd overheard one of his men mention he'd be here. The building was all dark glass and velvet ropes, the kind of place where the cover charge alone would eat my grocery budget for a month. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb, and 2 men in dark suits stood at the entrance, their eyes scanning the street with mechanical precision. I must have looked insane. My hair hung in wet ropes down my back, my cheap coat doing nothing against the November cold, my canvas sneakers squeaking with each step. But I walked forward anyway, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I need to see Dante Moretti," I said to the larger of the 2 guards. He didn't even blink. "No, you don't." "Please, My voice cracked. God, what was I even doing? I need to talk to him. It's important. "Lady, you and 50 other girls tonight." The guard's expression remained flat, bored. "Keep moving." Humiliation burned through my chest, hot and acidic. Of course. Of course I was just another desperate woman chasing a man so far out of my league we weren't even playing the same game. I should have turned around, should have salvaged whatever dignity I had left. Instead, I did something stupid. Tell him the girl from Romano's is here. The one who spilled water on his table. The guard's radio crackled. He turned slightly, murmuring something I couldn't hear. 10 seconds passed. 20. The rain soaked through to my skin, and I started to shiver, my teeth chattering. Then the radio crackled again. "Send her up." My stomach dropped. The guard stepped aside, and suddenly I was moving through the entrance, past the velvet rope, into a lobby that smelled like expensive cologne and leather. Another man appeared, older, gray at the temples, with eyes that looked like they'd seen things that would make me lose sleep for months. "Follow me," he said. It wasn't a request. We took an elevator that opened with a key card. The ascent was silent except for the mechanical whir of movement, and my own ragged breathing. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls, pale, dripping, small. What was I thinking? That a man like Dante Moretti would what? Fall for me? Care about me? I didn't even know why I was here, what I wanted from him, except that I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd called me Angel. Like the word meant something. The elevator opened into a private lounge. Dark wood, amber lighting, the clink of crystal glasses. And there, near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sat Dante. He was alone, though two men stood near the bar, their postures alert. He had a glass of whiskey in one hand, and when he saw me, he went completely still. Not surprised. Something else. Something that made the air feel thinner. He stood slowly, and even across the room, I felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. He was taller than I remembered, broader through the shoulders, and there was something predatory in the way he moved toward me. Not aggressive, but deliberate, calculated. "You're soaking wet," he said. It was such an ordinary observation that it nearly made me laugh. Here I was, dripping on what was probably a $50,000 rug, and that was what he led with. My voice failed. I swallowed, tried again. "I needed to see you." "Why?" One word. Flat, almost cold. But his eyes burned, tracking over my face, my wet hair, the way my coat hung open to reveal my server uniform underneath. "I don't know," I admitted. And it was the most honest thing I'd said in months. "I can't stop thinking about you." The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the men by the bar shifted, his hand moving inside his jacket. But Dante held up one finger and the man froze. "You shouldn't be here," Dante said quietly. "I know. You have no idea who I am. I know enough." His jaw tightened. He took another step closer, and I could smell him now. Sandalwood and something darker, like smoke. "What's your name?" "Elena." It came out as a whisper. "Elena Torres. Elena." He repeated it like he was tasting it, testing the weight of it on his tongue. Then, so softly I almost missed it. "Cristo, you're going to ruin me." Before I could process that, before I could ask what he meant, he turned to the man by the bar. "Marco, get her a towel and something warm to drink. Boss. Now." The command in his voice was absolute. Marco disappeared through a side door, and Dante's attention swung back to me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the leather couch. I obeyed, because what else could I do? My body was shaking. From cold, from adrenaline, from the sheer insanity of what I'd done. Dante sat across from me, elbows on his knees, that whiskey glass dangling from his fingers. He studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "How old are you?" 24. "Family?" "My mom. She's in a care facility. Early onset dementia." The words hurt to say out loud, like admitting it made it more real. Something flickered across his face. "That's why you work doubles at Romano's." It wasn't a question. He knew. Somehow he'd found out about me in the 3 weeks since I'd spilled that water. The realization should have scared me. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down my spine. Marco returned with a thick towel and a mug of something that steamed. Hot chocolate, I realized when I took a sip. Not the cheap powdered kind, but real, melted dark chocolate with a hint of cinnamon. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Dante watched me drink. "Why did you come here tonight, Elena?" "I told you. I couldn't stop." "No." He leaned forward, and suddenly he was close enough that I could see the faint scar through his left eyebrow, the way his pupils had dilated. The truth. "What do you want from me?" My heart was a wild thing in my chest. "I don't know. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible. Maybe I wanted to see if you'd remember me. Maybe—" I stopped, horrified at what I'd almost said. "Maybe what?" "Maybe I wanted you to look at me the way you did that night, like I mattered." The words hung between us, raw and pathetic. I waited for him to laugh, to dismiss me, to have his men throw me out onto the street where I belonged. Instead, Dante Moretti set down his glass very carefully, as if he didn't trust his own hands. When he spoke, his voice was rough, almost angry. "You need to leave. Right now. and you need to forget you ever met me. Why? Because I'm not a good man, Elena. And if you stay, if you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to do something we'll both regret. But he didn't call his men, didn't stand up. Just sat there, coiled tension, and barely restrained hunger, his knuckles white where they gripped his knees. And that's when I made my second mistake of the night. I reached out and touched his hand. His skin was warm, the gold ring smooth under my fingertips. He flinched like I'd burned him, his breath hissing between his teeth. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his hand turned, fast as a snake strike, and his fingers closed around my wrist. Not painful, but inescapable. "You have no idea what you're starting," he whispered. The elevator dinged behind us. The doors opened, and a man stepped out. Younger than Dante, with slicked back hair and a smile that looked expensive and empty. "Dante, I heard you were—" He stopped, his gaze landing on me, on Dante's hand around my wrist. His smile widened into something ugly. "Well, well, found a new pet?" Dante's entire body went rigid. When he spoke, his voice could have cut glass. "Get out, Luca. Come on, cousin. Surely you can share—" Dante stood so fast the couch shifted. He didn't let go of my wrist, pulling me up with him, positioning himself between me and Luca, with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this before. I said, "Get out." Luca's hands rose in mock surrender, but his eyes stayed on me, crawling over my wet uniform, my trembling body. "You always did have a taste for strays. Just remember, Dante, strays bite." He disappeared back into the elevator, and the tension in Dante's shoulders didn't ease until the doors closed completely. Then he turned to me, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. "You're leaving. Tonight. I'm putting you in a car with Marco, and you're going home, and you're never coming near me again. Understand?" "No." The word surprised us both. "No." His laugh was brittle. "Elena, you just made yourself a target. That bastard will—" He stopped, his jaw working. "You don't understand. My world, it's not. People like you don't survive people like us." "Then teach me," I said, and I didn't know where the boldness came from, only that I was so tired of being afraid, of being small, of being nothing. "You want me to leave? Make me." I watched something snap behind his eyes. Some carefully maintained control just shattered. His hand came up, cupping my jaw with a gentleness that contradicted the fury in his expression. "You're going to regret this," he said softly. "Maybe. I'm going to ruin you. You said that already." His thumb brushed my lower lip, and I stopped breathing. "No, Angel, you don't understand. I'm going to ruin you for everyone else. After me, no other man will ever be enough. You'll be mine, and I'll be damned if I let you go." It should have terrified me. Instead, heat pooled low in my stomach, dangerous and intoxicating. "Then keep me," I whispered. Dante's eyes closed, his forehead dropping to mine. For a moment he just breathed, and I could feel the war raging inside him. Then he pulled back, releasing me so abruptly I stumbled. "Marco!" His voice cracked like a whip. "Take Miss Torres home. Stay with her tonight. Tomorrow I want a full security detail on her building. Boss?" Marco looked as confused as I felt. Dante's eyes found mine one last time, and what I saw there made my knees weak. Possession. Hunger, something that looked almost like fear. "She's mine now," he said. "And that means she's a target. So keep her alive." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing through a door I hadn't noticed, leaving me standing there with Marco and the lingering scent of sandalwood and smoke. I'd come here chasing a fantasy. A dangerous, beautiful man who'd made me feel seen for 3 seconds in a mediocre Italian restaurant. I just didn't know I'd walked straight into a cage I'd never escape. Marco didn't speak during the drive. The SUV smelled like leather and gun oil, and I sat in the back seat with my hands folded in my lap, trying to process what had just happened. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of gold and red that made everything feel dreamlike, unreal. She's mine now. Those words played on repeat in my head. in Dante's rough voice, and each time they sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. "We're here," Marco said, pulling up to my building. It looked even more pathetic than usual. Cracked concrete steps, a door that didn't lock properly, graffiti sprawling across the brick like infected veins. I watched Marco's eyes sweep the street, cataloging shadows and doorways with professional efficiency. "You don't have to stay," I told him. "I'll be fine." He gave me a look that suggested I'd just said something profoundly stupid. "Boss says I stay, I stay." "Which floor?" "Third, apartment 3C. We climbed the stairs in silence. The hallway reeked of old cooking grease and mildew, and I fumbled with my keys, hyper-aware of Marco standing behind me like a well-dressed sentinel. My apartment was exactly how I'd left it. A shoebox with a kitchenette, a mattress on the floor, and walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's television through the drywall. Marco surveyed the space with the same methodical precision he'd used on the street. He checked the window locks, tested the door, even looked inside my tiny closet. Apparently satisfied, he positioned himself in the corner with a clear view of both the door and window. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll be here." "All night?" "All night." I wanted to argue, to tell him this was insane, that Dante was overreacting. But the memory of Luca's eyes crawling over me stopped the words in my throat. I changed into dry clothes in the bathroom, threadbare sweatpants and a t-shirt with a hole near the hem, and lay down on my mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep should have been impossible. Instead, exhaustion pulled me under like a tide. I dreamed of dark eyes and gold rings, of hands that could break me or hold me, and I wasn't sure which terrified me more. Sunlight woke me, weak November sun filtering through the curtains I'd made from an old bedsheet. I sat up, disoriented, and found Marco exactly where I'd left him, though now he was on his phone, speaking in rapid Italian. "She's awake," he said, then held out the phone to me. "Boss wants to talk to you." My hand shook as I took it. "Hello? Did you sleep?" Dante's voice was different over the phone, rougher, like he hadn't slept at all. "Yes, I'm fine. Good. Marco's going to take you to work. Don't argue," he added before I could speak. "And Elena? Don't talk to anyone about last night. Not your coworkers, not your friends. No one." "I don't have friends," I said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. But Dante just made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something sadder. "Now you have me, whether you want it or not." He hung up before I could respond. The drive to Romano's felt surreal. Marco parked in the loading zone like he owned it, and I half expected him to follow me inside. Instead, he just said, "I'll be here when your shift ends." Romano's was in its usual pre-lunch chaos, Maria barking orders in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and tomatoes heavy in the air, the espresso machine hissing and spitting. I tied on my apron and tried to pretend everything was normal. It lasted exactly 40 minutes. I was taking an order from table 12 when I felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. I turned and saw him through the front window. Dante, leaning against a black sedan that definitely hadn't been there before, his arms crossed over his chest. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look younger, almost approachable, except for the two men flanking him, and the way everyone who passed gave them a wide berth. My pen slipped from my fingers. "You okay, honey?" The woman at table 12 frowned at me. "Fine. Sorry. The chicken parmigiana, right?" But I wasn't fine. I could feel Dante's gaze like a physical touch, heavy and possessive, and when I glanced back, he was still there, still watching. Maria noticed during my break. She cornered me by the storage closet, her expression a mixture of fear and fury. "What did you do?" "I don't know what you—" "Don't lie to me, Elena. Dante Moretti has been standing outside this restaurant for 2 hours. 2 hours. Do you understand what that means? What people will think?" My stomach twisted. "I didn't mean—" "That man is poison. His family. They own half this city, and the other half is too scared to admit it. You need to quit. Tonight. Pack your things and leave town." "I can't." The words came out harder than I intended. "My mom will be fine without you if you're alive." Maria gripped my shoulders, and there were tears in her eyes. Please, Elena. I've seen what happens to girls who get involved with men like him. It doesn't end well. But it was already too late. I knew it the moment I walked back onto the floor and saw Dante push off from his car, saw him walk through Romano's front door like he had every right to be there. The restaurant went silent. He moved through the space with that same predatory grace, and people shifted out of his way without seeming to realize they were doing it. His eyes found me immediately, and the small smile that touched his lips was almost gentle. Almost. Elena, he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a claim. We need to talk. I was vaguely aware of Maria's sharp inhale, of the other servers frozen mid-step, of the couple at table 7 staring with undisguised curiosity. But all I could focus on was Dante, on the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I'm working, I managed. Not anymore. He turned to Maria, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. She's done for the day. I'm sure you understand. It wasn't a request. Maria nodded, pale and wordless, and just like that, I was untying my apron with numb fingers, following Dante out into the cold November air. The sedan's back door was already open. I slid inside, and Dante followed, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, and I realized I had no idea where we were going. You're angry, Dante said. Not a question. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I protected you. By making me look like you're... I couldn't finish the sentence. Mine? He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze stole my breath. That's exactly what you are, Elena. I thought I made that clear last night. You can't just claim people like they're property. Can I? His hand moved, fingers curling around the back of my neck, and I froze, not from fear, from the sudden electric awareness of his touch. Tell me you didn't think about me last night. Tell me you didn't lie awake wondering what it would be like if I kissed you, if I touched you, if I made you forget every man who came before me. I couldn't, because he was right, because I had thought about exactly that. Where are we going? I asked instead, hating how breathless I sounded. My place. You're going to stay there until I figure out how to keep Luca away from you. I have a job, an apartment, a life. You have me. His thumb stroked the pulse point below my ear, and my traitorous body leaned into the touch. Everything else is negotiable. The car turned into an underground garage, all concrete and shadows and security cameras that tracked our movement. We took a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan, and when the doors opened, I stepped into an apartment that belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked Italian and expensive. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than I'd make in my lifetime. Everything was in shades of black, gray, and chrome. Beautiful and cold and utterly impersonal. Guest room is down the hall, Dante said, shrugging out of his jacket. You'll find clothes in the closet. They should fit. You keep women's clothes in your guest room? His eyes darkened. I had them delivered this morning. Your size, your style. Or at least what I imagine your style would be if you could afford it. The casual way he said it, like buying an entire wardrobe for a woman he barely knew, was normal, left me speechless. I can't stay here, I said, but it sounded weak even to my own ears. Yes, you can. He moved closer, backing me against the window, and the glass was cold through my thin shirt. You walked into my world, Elena. Chased me. Made yourself visible to people who would hurt you just to hurt me. So now you're here and you're safe, and you're going to let me take care of you whether you like it or not. This is insane. Yes. His hand came up, fingers threading through my hair. It is. But I warned you. I told you I'd ruin you, and I meant it. Now you're mine, and I protect what's mine. What if I don't want to be yours? The question hung between us, and for a moment, something almost like pain flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar intensity. Then lie to me, he said softly. Tell me you don't feel this thing between us. Tell me your heart isn't racing right now. Tell me you don't want me to kiss you. I opened my mouth, closed it. because I couldn't lie. Not when he was looking at me like that. Not when every nerve in my body was screaming for him to close the distance between us. That's what I thought, he murmured. But he didn't kiss me. Instead, he stepped back, putting careful space between us, and the loss of his proximity felt like a physical ache. Get settled, he said. I have work to do. Marco will be outside your door if you need anything. What kind of work? His smile was sharp, dangerous. The kind you don't want to know about, Angel. He left me there, standing in his pristine apartment with the city spread out below me like a promise or a threat, and I realized with startling clarity that I'd just traded one prison for another, except this cage was gilded, and the man holding the key was the most dangerous thing I'd ever encountered. I should have been terrified. Instead, I walked to the guest room, found the closet full of clothes that fit perfectly, and wondered what it said about me that I was already planning what to wear when I saw him again. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Dante left early each morning and returned late, always with Marco or one of his other men. He never touched me again, never came closer than arm's length. But his eyes followed me constantly, hungry and possessive, and almost angry. I spent my days exploring the apartment, reading books from his extensive library, staring out at the city, and trying to figure out how my life had spiraled so completely out of control. He'd had my things moved from my apartment without asking, had arranged for someone to visit my mother at the care facility daily, making sure she was comfortable, that she had everything she needed. You can't pay for that, I'd told him the first night, during one of our tense dinners where we sat across from each other like strangers. I already did. Dante, your mother needs care. I'm providing it. This isn't a negotiation, Elena. And that was how every conversation went. He made decisions, gave orders, rearranged my life to fit whatever vision he had in his head, and I was supposed to just accept it. On the 4th night, I snapped. He came home late, smelling like smoke and something metallic that made my stomach turn. There was blood on his collar. Not his, I realized with a lurch. And when he saw me standing in the living room in one of the silk pajama sets he'd bought, his expression shuddered. Go to bed, Elena. No. He stopped, his hand halfway to his tie. What? I said no. I'm not a child you can order around. I'm not one of your men you can intimidate into obedience. I'm a person, and you're treating me like what? He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, and suddenly he was there, towering over me, his presence overwhelming. Like you're precious? Like you're worth protecting? Like the thought of something happening to you makes me want to burn this entire city to the ground? His voice had risen, rough with an emotion I couldn't name. And there was something wild in his eyes, something that looked almost like desperation. You don't even know me, I whispered. I know enough. His hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted every hard line of his body. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to pay for your mother's care. I know you're kind to people who don't deserve it. I know you're brave enough to walk into a Mafia lounge in the rain just to see me again. And I know... His thumb brushed my cheekbone. I know that you've gotten under my skin in a way no one ever has, and it's going to destroy us both. Then let me go. I can't. The words sounded like they'd been torn from him. Christo, Elena, I've tried. But you're in my head, in my blood, and I'm not strong enough to walk away. His forehead dropped to mine, and for a moment, we just breathed together. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment like glass. He pulled back, checking the screen, and whatever he saw made his expression harden. Stay here, he ordered. Don't leave this apartment. Don't even go near the windows. Fear spiked through me. What's wrong? Luca knows you're here, and he's making moves. Dante's jaw clenched. Marco! His second appeared from somewhere, alert and ready, double the security. No one gets past the lobby. No one. Boss, do it, now. Marco left, and Dante turned back to me. The blood on his collar seemed darker in the low light, more damning. I need you to trust me, he said quietly. How can I trust someone who won't tell me the truth? Something in his expression cracked. He reached for me, pulling me against his chest with a fierceness that stole my breath, and I could feel his heart hammering against my cheek. "The truth is that you were right," he said into my hair. "I am ruining you. But you ruined me first, Angel. The moment you looked at me like I was something other than a monster, you ruined me for anyone else." He held me like that for a long moment, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with the scent of smoke and sandalwood, and the terrifying realization that I was falling for a man who wore blood on his collar and danger in his eyes, a man who'd just admitted I'd destroyed him as surely as he was destroying me. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump, the distant wail of sirens, the creak of the building settling, the muffled voices of the security team outside the apartment door. I lay in the oversized bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled faintly of Dante's cologne, and tried to make sense of the chaos my life had become. When dawn finally broke, painting the city in shades of amber and rose, I gave up on rest. I showered, dressed in dark jeans and a cream sweater from the seemingly endless wardrobe he'd provided, and ventured into the kitchen. Marco was there, making coffee with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Boss left early. Said you're not to leave the building." Of course he did. I poured myself a cup, inhaling the rich aroma. "How long have you worked for him?" Marco's eyes flicked to me, assessing. 12 years. Since we were kids. He's a good man? I don't know why I asked. Maybe I needed someone else to confirm what I felt, to tell me I wasn't crazy for trusting someone so dangerous. Marco's laugh was short, almost bitter. "He's not a good man, Miss Torres, but he's a loyal one, and once he decides something is his, he'll kill to keep it safe." He set down his mug, his gaze steady on mine. "That includes you now, whether you asked for it or not." The weight of those words settled over me like a shroud. The morning dragged. I tried to read, to watch television, to do anything to distract myself from the suffocating luxury of my gilded cage. But everything felt hollow. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A new phone I'd discovered, that Dante had somehow acquired and loaded with only a handful of contacts. His number, Marco's. Emergency services. The message was from Dante. "How are you?" My fingers hovered over the screen. I could be angry. Could demand answers, freedom, my old life back. Instead, I typed, "Bored, worried, wishing you'd tell me what's happening." His response came immediately. "Tonight, I promise. Trust me a little longer." I stared at those words until they blurred. Trust. Such a simple thing he was asking for, and yet so impossible when I knew so little about him. Another message. "Wear the black dress in your closet. We're going out." My heart kicked against my ribs. "Where?" "Somewhere I can keep my eyes on you." The black dress was stunning, silk that clung to my curves like water, with a neckline that dipped just low enough to make me feel powerful and vulnerable at once. I found heels that matched, delicate and dangerously high, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked expensive, dangerous, like she belonged in Dante's world. He arrived at 7, and when Marco let him in, I watched his entire body go still. His eyes tracked over me slowly, deliberately, and the hunger in his gaze made heat pool low in my stomach. "Christo," he breathed. "You're going to kill me, Angel." He wore a black suit, tailored to perfection, with a dark gray shirt underneath that he'd left open at the collar. No tie. The gold ring on his finger caught the light as he extended his hand to me. "Where are we going?" I asked, taking it. "A charity gala. I need to make an appearance, and I need everyone to see you with me." His fingers tightened around mine, especially Luca. My stomach dropped. "Is that safe? With me?" "Always." He pulled me closer, his free hand settling on the small of my back. "I won't let anything happen to you, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that?" I should have said no. Should have demanded more explanation, more honesty, but the way he looked at me, like I was something precious he was terrified of breaking, made me nod. "Good girl," he murmured, and the approval in his voice sent electricity down my spine. The gala was at the Venetian Hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal chandeliers and old money. Women in designer gowns glittered like jewels. Men in expensive suits congregated in tight clusters, and the air smelled like champagne and ambition. Dante kept me close, his hand never leaving the small of my back. His body angled so he was always between me and the crowd. People parted for him instinctively, and I watched fear and respect flicker across their faces in equal measure. Dante Moretti. A silver-haired man approached, his smile practiced and empty. Didn't expect to see you here, Senator. Dante's greeting was cool, wouldn't miss it. This is Elena Torres. Elena, Senator Mitchell. The senator's eyes slid over me, calculating, charming. Are you new in town, Miss Torres? Just new to this world, I said carefully. Dante's hand tightened on my waist. A silent warning or maybe approval, I couldn't tell. The senator laughed, made some vapid comment about youth and beauty, and moved on. But I'd felt it, the subtle shift in the room's attention. People were watching us now, watching me. You're doing perfectly, Dante said against my ear, his breath warm. Just stay close. We moved through the crowd, and he introduced me to a parade of people whose names I immediately forgot. Businessmen, politicians, women with smiles like knives. And through it all, Dante remained a steady presence at my side. Calm, controlled, utterly in command. Until Luca appeared. He materialized from the crowd like a shark sensing blood, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Cousin," he drawled, lifting a champagne flute in mock salute. "And the lovely stray, how domestic." Dante's entire body went rigid. I felt the violence coiling inside him, saw his jaw clench, and instinctively I placed my hand on his chest. His heart was hammering. "Walk away, Luca," Dante said softly, "before I forget we're family." "Oh, but I wanted to get to know your new pet." Luca stepped closer, and two men flanking him moved with synchronized precision. "Tell me, sweetheart, does he keep you locked up? Does he let you out of his sight for even a minute? Or are you suffocating yet? She's exactly where she wants to be," Dante cut in, his voice lethal. "Which is more than any woman has ever said about you." Luca's smile turned vicious. "We'll see how long that lasts. Women like her, they're disposable, a novelty. You'll get bored, Dante, and when you do, maybe I'll be there to pick up the pieces." Everything happened fast. Dante moved, his hand shooting out to grab Luca's collar, and suddenly there were hands everywhere. Marco materializing from nowhere, Luca's men reaching for their weapons, guests gasping and scrambling back. "Touch her," Dante snarled, and his voice was nothing human. "Even look at her the wrong way, and I will end you. Family or not. Do you understand me?" Luca's face had gone pale, but his smile remained. "You're making a mistake. She's a weakness, Dante, and weaknesses get exploited." Marco pulled Dante back before he could do something irreversible, and I found myself being ushered toward the exit, my heart in my throat. We moved through side corridors, past shocked staff and security, until we burst out into the cold night air. The car was waiting. Dante pushed me inside, sliding in after me, and the door had barely closed before he was on me, his hands in my hair, his mouth crashing against mine with a desperation that stole my breath. I gasped, and he swallowed the sound, kissing me like a drowning man finding air. His hands roamed my back, my waist, pulling me impossibly closer until I was half in his lap and he was everywhere. His taste, his scent, the overwhelming intensity of him consuming every thought. "Mine," he growled against my lips. "Say it. Say you're mine." "Yours," I breathed, and I meant it. God help me, I meant it. He pulled back, his forehead pressed to mine, both of us breathing hard. His hands were shaking where they cupped my face. "I almost killed him," he said roughly. "Right there, in front of everyone. Because he looked at you like you were something he could take from me. Dante, no, listen." His eyes burned into mine. "I've done terrible things, Elena. Things that would make you run if you knew. I've hurt people, ruined lives, built an empire on blood and fear, but you," his voice cracked, "you make me want to be something different, something better. And that terrifies me more than anything I've ever faced." I traced the line of his jaw, feeling the tension thrumming beneath his skin. "Then be better. With me. For me. It's not that simple. Nothing about this is simple. I kissed him softly, tasting the desperation still lingering on his lips. But I'm here. I'm not running. Not yet. The drive back to his apartment was silent, charged with everything unsaid. His hand stayed locked with mine, and I could feel the war raging inside him, the man he was versus the man he wanted to be. When we arrived, he didn't let me go to the guest room. Instead, he pulled me to his bedroom, a space I'd never seen, all dark wood and masculine lines, with windows overlooking the city lights. "Stay with me tonight," he said, and it wasn't an order. It was a plea. Just stay. So I did. We lay in his bed, fully clothed, his arms wrapped around me like he was afraid I'd disappear. I could feel his heart beating against my back, steady and strong, and for the first time since this whole insane thing started, I felt safe. "I need to tell you something," he said into the darkness, "about my family, about what we do." "Okay." My father built our empire through intimidation and violence. When he died, I inherited everything. The businesses, the territory, the enemies. I was 19. His voice was flat, reciting facts like they belonged to someone else. I told myself I'd be different, smarter, less brutal. But this world doesn't reward mercy, Elena. It rewards strength. So I became what I needed to be. I turned in his arms, finding his face in the shadows. "What changed?" "You." His hand came up, brushing hair from my face. "You looked at me like I was human. Not a weapon, not a monster, just a man. And I realized I'd forgotten how to be that." "You're still human, Dante. You're just scared." His laugh was bitter, terrified, because losing you would break something in me I didn't know could still break. I kissed him then, soft and slow, pouring everything I couldn't say into the gesture. He responded carefully, reverently, like I was something precious he was afraid of damaging. When we finally broke apart, he tucked me against his chest and held me while the city glittered beyond the windows. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, surrounded by his warmth and the steady rhythm of his breathing, I fell asleep. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of escape. I dreamed of staying. Morning came too soon. I woke to find Dante already up, standing by the window in low-slung sweatpants and nothing else. The early light painted his back in gold, highlighting scars I hadn't noticed before. A roadmap of violence etched into his skin. "You're staring," he said without turning. "You're worth staring at." He glanced over his shoulder, and the small smile that touched his lips was almost shy. "Come here." I patted across the cold floor, and he pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Together we watched the city wake up. Delivery trucks rumbling through streets, lights flickering on in apartment windows, the first hints of dawn breaking through the clouds. "Luca won't let this go," he said quietly. "Last night was a challenge. He'll retaliate. What will you do?" "Whatever I have to." His arms tightened. "But I need you to promise me something. If things get dangerous, if I tell you to run, you do it. No questions, no hesitation. You run and you don't look back. Dante, promise me, Elena." I turned in his arms, meeting his desperate gaze. "I promise." It was a lie. We both knew it, because I'd already made my choice the night I walked into that lounge in the rain. I'd chosen him, his darkness, his danger, his devastating capacity for both violence and tenderness. And whatever came next, whatever price I'd have to pay, I was done running. I was staying, right here, in the heart of the storm. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that felt almost normal. Dante went to work, whatever that entailed, and I learned not to ask too many questions when he came home with tension in his shoulders and shadows in his eyes. I spent my days reading, cooking elaborate meals I'd never had time for before, and visiting my mother at the care facility with Marco as my constant shadow. My mother's room was bright and clean, filled with flowers Dante sent weekly. She didn't always recognize me anymore. But on good days, she'd smile and call me Mija and ask about school like I was still 19 and full of dreams that hadn't been crushed by medical bills and reality. Your boyfriend is very generous, one of the nurses told me during a visit. The private care, the medications, he's made sure she has everything. Boyfriend. The word felt too small for what Dante was becoming to me, too innocent. He's complicated, I said. The nurse smiled knowingly. The good ones usually are, but Dante wasn't good. He'd told me that himself, shown me in the scars on his body and the blood that sometimes stained his clothes. Yet when he held me at night, when he traced patterns on my skin like he was memorizing me, when he looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to humanity, in those moments, he felt like the best thing that had ever happened to me. I was falling, hard and fast and without a safety net. And the terrifying part? I didn't want to stop. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything shifted. I was in Dante's study, a room I'd been avoiding because it felt too intimate, too much like trespassing, looking for a book when I found the photographs. They were in a drawer I'd opened by accident, tucked beneath folders and documents, old photographs, some in color, some black and white. A younger Dante with a man who had the same dark eyes and sharp jaw. His father, I assumed. Dante at maybe 10 years old, already too serious, standing next to a beautiful woman with kind eyes. His mother. And then, beneath those, a photograph that made my blood run cold. My father. Not a man who looked like my father. Not someone similar. My actual father, Carlos Torres, who'd abandoned us when I was 12 and who I hadn't seen since. He was standing next to Dante's father, both of them in suits, shaking hands in front of what looked like a warehouse. My hands started shaking. I flipped to the next photo. Same location, different angle. My father handing over a briefcase. Dante's father counting money. "What are you doing?" I spun around. Dante stood in the doorway, still in his coat. And the moment he saw what I was holding, his expression went carefully blank. "Elena, you knew my father." My voice sounded distant, disconnected from my body. "You knew him, and you never told me." He closed the door behind him, moving slowly, like I was a wild animal he was afraid of spoking. "Put the photos down. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That this whole thing," I gestured between us, my voice rising, "was some kind of sick game, that you knew who I was all along? That I was never just some random girl who spilled water on your table? It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Dante?" I threw the photos onto his desk, and they scattered across the polished wood like accusations. "Tell me the truth. For once, just tell me the goddamn truth." He flinched at the profanity. I never cursed. He'd noticed that. And something in his expression crumbled. "Your father worked for mine," he said quietly. 20 years ago. He was an accountant, handled the books for several of our businesses. And then he stole $3 million and disappeared. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "No. My father left because he stole from my family and ran. And my father spent years trying to find him." Dante's voice was flat, reciting facts. "He never did. Carlos Torres vanished like smoke. New identity, new life. We assumed he'd left the country. Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out as a whisper. "Because I didn't know who you were at first. The night at Romano's, that was coincidence, pure chance. But after, when I had you researched," he stopped, running a hand through his hair. "When I saw your name, your father's name, I should have walked away, but I could have let you go, because you wanted revenge." The pieces were falling into place, each one landing like a blow. "You wanted to use me to get to him." "No." He crossed to me in 3 strides, gripping my shoulders. "At first, maybe. For about 5 seconds, I thought about using you as leverage. But then I actually looked at you, talked to you, and I realized you were a victim too. He abandoned you, left you to struggle and suffer while he lived off stolen money somewhere." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You still should have told me. I know. Cristo, Elena, I know. But I was terrified you'd run, that you'd look at me and see your father's sins reflected back, and I'd lose you before I even had you." His hand slid up to cut my face, and his eyes were desperate. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But everything else, everything I've felt, everything I've done, that's been real. You have to believe that. I wanted to pull away, wanted to rage at him for the deception, for keeping something so fundamental from me. But his touch was gentle, his voice raw with honesty, and I could see the fear in his eyes, real, visceral fear that I'd leave him. Does he know? I asked. My father. Does he know you found me? No. We still don't know where he is. Dante's jaw clenched. But I have people looking. And when you find him what? You'll kill him? The silence was answer enough. I pulled away from his grip, wrapping my arms around myself. He's still my father, Dante. Whatever he did, however much I hate him for leaving, he's still my father. He's a thief and a coward who stole from my family and abandoned his own. Dante's voice had gone cold, and I saw a flash of the man he was in his world, merciless, unforgiving. He deserves what's coming to him, and what about what I deserve? I turned to face him fully. Don't I deserve the truth? Don't I deserve to be more than a pawn in whatever game you're playing? You were never a pawn. He closed the distance between us again, and this time there was something almost frantic in his movements. You're everything, Elena. You're the only thing that matters. I swear to you, on my life, on everything I have, you were never part of the revenge. You became something else entirely. What? Everything. The word broke from him. You became everything. I stared at him, at this dangerous, complicated man who'd lied to me and protected me and somehow made me feel more alive than I'd ever felt. And I knew I should leave, should walk out that door and never look back. But I didn't. If you find him, I said carefully, I want to be there. I want to talk to him, to ask him why. And you don't touch him until I've had that chance. Agreed? Dante's eyes searched mine. Elena, those are my terms. Take them or I walk out that door right now, and you never see me again. The threat was real. We both knew it. And I watched him struggle with it, watched the Mafia boss war with the man who'd admitted I was everything. Finally, he nodded, agreed. But if he tries to hurt you, if he so much as raises his voice, then you can do what you need to do. It was a terrible bargain, weighted with violence and unspoken consequences. But it was the best I could offer, the best either of us could do. Dante pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. I can't lose you, he said into my neck. I know I have no right to ask, no right to keep you, but Cristo, Elena, I can't lose you. Then don't lie to me again. I pulled back to meet his eyes. Whatever happens, whatever you need to tell me, even if you think it'll make me leave, you tell me the truth. Always. Always, he promised. I kissed him then, hard and desperate, trying to bridge the gap his deception had created. He responded with equal fervor, his hands roaming my back, my waist, pulling me closer like he could fuse us together through sheer will. We stumbled to the leather couch in his study, a tangle of lips and hands and half-shed clothing. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, and there was something new in his eyes. Relief mixed with residual fear. I love you, he said, and the words hung in the air between us, raw and unvarnished. I know it's too soon. I know I have no right, but I love you, Elena, more than I've ever loved anything. My heart stuttered in my chest. I'd known, somewhere deep down, that this was where we were heading, but hearing him say it, hearing the vulnerability in his voice, made it real in a way nothing else had. I love you too, I whispered, and watched something fundamental shift in his expression. Even though you're complicated and dangerous and you've turned my entire life upside down, I love you. He kissed me again, softer this time, reverent. And for a moment, the lies and the danger and the impossible situation we'd found ourselves in faded away. There was just us. Two broken people who'd somehow found something whole in each other. That night, Dante got a call that changed everything. We were in bed, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my shoulder. When his phone buzzed, I felt him tense. What is it? He asked after glancing at the screen. Then, when? A pause. Keep eyes on him. I'm coming. He was out of bed before I could ask questions, pulling on clothes with military efficiency. What's wrong? They found him. Dante's voice was flat. Your father. He's in the city. Has been for months, apparently. My stomach dropped. Where? A hotel downtown. Luca's hotel. He paused in buttoning his shirt, meeting my eyes. This isn't coincidence, Elena. Luca brought him here. He's using your father as bait. For what? For me. For us. Dante crossed to me, kneeling beside the bed so we were eye level. He knows I'll come. Knows I can't resist finishing what my father started, and he'll be waiting. Then don't go. I gripped his hand. It's a trap. You said so yourself. I have to. If I don't... He stopped, his jaw working. If I don't, I look weak. And in my world, then I'm coming with you. Weakness is death. Absolutely not. You promised. I held his gaze. You promised I could talk to him, that I could have answers before whatever happens next. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, to lock me in this room and go face whatever fresh nightmare Luca had arranged. But he'd made a promise, and I could see him struggling with the weight of it. You stay in the car, he finally said. With Marco. You don't get out unless I personally come get you. And if anything goes wrong, if shooting starts, if you sense danger, Marco drives you away. No arguments. Understood. Understood. It was a lie. We both knew it. But sometimes lies were all we had. The drive to the hotel was tense and silent. Dante sat beside me, his hand locked with mine, his expression carved from stone. Marco drove with focused efficiency, and I could see 2 other cars flanking us. More of Dante's men, I realized. An entire convoy heading into what we all knew was a trap. The hotel was modern and sleek, all glass and steel, with Luca's name emblazoned across the front in gold letters. We pulled up to a side entrance, away from prying eyes, and Dante turned to me one final time. Remember your promise, he said. Remember yours, I countered. He kissed me, hard and desperate and tasting like goodbye, then slid out of the car. I watched him disappear into the building with 6 of his men, moving like shadows, and the silence that followed was deafening. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Something's wrong, Marco muttered, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. Then the first gunshot rang out, shattering glass somewhere above us. Then another. Then a symphony of violence that made my blood run cold. Drive, I said. Get me inside. Miss Torres? Now, Marco, that's an order. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, and whatever he saw in my face made him nod. The car lurched forward, and we were moving toward the entrance, toward the gunfire, toward whatever nightmare was waiting inside, toward Dante. Because I'd made him a promise, yes. But I'd also made myself one. I wasn't losing him. Not tonight. Not ever. Even if I had to walk through fire to keep him. The lobby was chaos incarnate. Glass littered the marble floor like diamonds, crunching under my feet as I ran. Marco was beside me, his weapon drawn, shouting into his radio in rapid Italian. Somewhere above us, more gunfire, sharp cracks that echoed through the stairwell like thunder. 3rd floor, Marco said, gripping my arm. Stay behind me. Anything moves, you hit the ground. Capiche? I nodded, my heart hammering so hard I could taste copper. We took the stairs 2 at a time, and each floor brought us closer to the violence. The smell hit me first. Gunpowder and something else. Something metallic and wrong that made my stomach heave. Blood. The 3rd floor hallway was a war zone. Bodies in suits, some Dante's men, some I didn't recognize, sprawled across expensive carpet turned dark with blood. Bullet holes punctured walls. A painting hung at a drunken angle, its frame splintered, and at the end of the hall, through an open doorway, I heard his voice. End of the line, cousin. Dante. Alive. My legs went weak with relief. Marco moved forward cautiously, and I followed, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Through the doorway, I could see into what looked like a penthouse suite. Dante stood in the center, his gun trained on someone I couldn't see, his suit jacket torn and blood seeping through his white shirt at the shoulder. He was hurt. "Elena." "No." Marco tried to grab me, but I was already moving, pushing past him into the room. The scene that greeted me would be burned into my memory forever. Dante, bleeding but standing firm, his weapon steady despite the injury. Luca, backed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, his expensive suit rumpled, a gun in his own hand but pointed at the floor. And between them, sitting in a chair like this was all some terrible play, was my father. Carlos Torres looked older than I remembered. Gray threaded through his dark hair, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. He wore a cheap suit that hung wrong on his frame, and when he saw me, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or regret. "Mija," he said, and hearing that word, the same one my mother used on her good days, from his lips made rage flood through me like acid. "Don't." My voice shook. "Don't you dare call me that." Dante turned slightly, never taking his eyes fully off Luca. "I told you to stay in the car. You're bleeding." "I'm fine." But his face was too pale, his jaw too tight. He wasn't fine. Luca laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. How touching. The little stray comes to save her master. "Tell me, Dante, does she know what you really are? What you've done?" "Shut up," Dante said quietly. And the menace in those two words made even Luca pause. I moved closer to my father, and Marco stayed at my back, his weapon trained on Luca. Up close, I could see the tremor in Carlos's hands, the fear in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid. Why? The question ripped from me. Why did you leave us? Why did you let Mom suffer, let me struggle while you… what? Lived off stolen money somewhere? I didn't have a choice, he said, and his voice was smaller than I remembered, lacking the authority I'd thought he possessed when I was 12. Dante's father, he would have killed me. I took the money to disappear, to protect you and your mother. Liar. Dante's voice cut through the excuse like a blade. You took the money because you were greedy and weak. And you left your family to rot while you lived in cheap hotels and gambled away what you'd stolen. My father's face crumpled. I was going to come back. I was going to… You were going to nothing. I heard my own voice, cold and distant. You abandoned us. Mom got sick, and you weren't there. I dropped out of school to work 3 jobs, and you weren't there. And now, my hands clenched into fists. Now you're here as bait in someone else's game, and you're still making excuses. Elena, please, did you even think about us? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Did you wonder if we were okay, if we needed you? Every day. His voice broke. Every single day. Then you're an even bigger coward than I thought. I turned away from him, unable to look at his face anymore. Because if you really cared, you would have found a way. You would have tried. The silence that followed was broken by Luca's slow clap. Brava, he said mockingly. What a touching family reunion. But I'm afraid we're running out of time. You see, Dante, I've called the police. Told them there's an active shooter situation at my hotel. They'll be here in… He glanced at his watch. 5 minutes. Maybe less. And when they arrive, they'll find you standing over bodies, covered in blood, with an illegal weapon. Your empire. Your reputation. It all ends tonight. Dante's expression didn't change, but I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. You'd destroy yourself just to take me down? Oh, I won't be here when they arrive. I have diplomatic immunity, remember? Courtesy of that senator you hate so much. Luca's smile was venomous. I walk away clean while you rot in prison, or… His eyes slid to me. You could leave now. Run. Save yourself, but that means leaving your little pet here. And I promise you, cousin, I'll take very good care of her while you're locked away. The threat hung in the air, ugly and explicit. Dante's entire body went rigid, and I saw murder in his eyes. Pure, undiluted rage that made my blood run cold. Over my dead body, he said softly. That can be arranged. Everything happened at once. Luca's gun came up. Dante fired. My father lunged from his chair, shouting something I couldn't understand. Marco grabbed me, pulling me behind him. And through it all, I saw Dante's bullet catch Luca in the shoulder, spinning him back against the window. The glass spider-webbed but didn't break. Luca's return shot went wide, punching into the wall behind Dante's head. Then Marco was firing, and more of Dante's men were flooding into the room, and the noise was deafening, gunshots and shouting and the wail of sirens approaching fast. "We need to move," Marco shouted. "Now." But Dante wasn't moving. He was staring at Luca, who'd slumped against the cracked window, blood spreading across his expensive shirt, his gun hanging loose in his hand. "It's over," Dante said. "Call an ambulance. Get him help." "Boss, the cops, I said, call an ambulance." Dante's voice was absolute. "We don't leave family to die, even when they betray us." Something in Luca's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or the faint shadow of respect. He nodded once, then let his gun clatter to the floor. The sirens were getting louder. We had maybe 2 minutes. Dante turned to my father, and I saw him fighting with himself, violence and mercy warring in his eyes. Finally, he said, "Take him. Get him out of the city. Give him enough money to start over somewhere far from here. And if he ever comes back, if he ever contacts Elena or her mother—" "I understand," Marco said. My father looked at me one last time, his eyes wet with tears. "I'm sorry, mija. For everything." I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Marco's men hauled him to his feet and dragged him toward the service exit. Then Dante was gripping my hand, pulling me after them, and we were running. Down back stairs, through maintenance corridors, past shocked hotel staff who wisely looked the other way. We burst out into an alley where 3 cars waited. Dante pushed me into the back of one, sliding in beside me, and we were moving before the door even closed. "Hospital," Dante said to the driver, his voice tight with pain. "No hospitals," I said. "They'll report the gunshot wound. I have a doctor. Private." He leaned his head back against the seat, his face gray. "My place. Call Victor. Tell him to meet us there." The driver was already on the phone. I pressed my hands against Dante's shoulder, trying to slow the bleeding, and his blood was hot and slick between my fingers. "You're okay," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring him or myself. "You're going to be okay. I know." His eyes found mine, and despite everything, the violence, the blood, the sirens fading behind us, he smiled. "Because I have you." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Victor, a small, efficient man with surgeon's hands and no questions, stitched Dante's shoulder in the master bedroom while I paced outside the door. Marco coordinated cleanup, moving people and evidence, making phone calls in that rapid Italian I was starting to understand bits of. When Victor finally emerged, his hands scrubbed clean, he nodded at me. "He'll live. Bullet went through clean, missed everything important. Keep the wound clean. Change dressings twice daily, antibiotics for 10 days. He should rest, but knowing him—" A wry smile. "He won't." I slipped into the bedroom. Dante was sitting up against the headboard, his shoulder bandaged, his chest bare, looking exhausted, but alive, so beautifully, impossibly alive. "Come here," he said. I crossed to the bed and carefully climbed in beside him, mindful of his injury. He wrapped his good arm around me, pulling me against his chest, and for a long moment, we just breathed together. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For all of it. The lies, the danger, bringing you into this nightmare." "Stop," I pressed my finger to his lips. "I made my choice. I chose you. Even knowing what you are, what your world is, I chose you." "Why?" The question was raw, vulnerable. "Why would you choose this? Choose me?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the girl I'd been 3 weeks ago, invisible and exhausted and drowning in a life I hadn't chosen. About the woman I was becoming, still scared, but no longer invisible, no longer drowning. "Because you see me," I said simply. "In a world that treated me like I didn't matter, you looked at me and saw someone worth protecting, worth loving. And maybe it's crazy, maybe it's dangerous, but that's more than anyone else has ever given me." His eyes closed, and I saw moisture on his lashes. "I don't deserve you, Probably not. I kissed his jaw gently. But you're stuck with me anyway, he laughed. The sound rough but genuine. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll tell me if this life, if I ever become too much, if you need out, need space, need anything, you'll tell me and I'll give it to you, even if it kills me. I promise. I traced the edge of his bandage carefully. But I'm not going anywhere. You're mine now, Dante Moretti. And I protect what's mine. He smiled at that, pulling me closer despite his injury. When did you get so fierce? When I fell in love with a Mafia boss. We stayed like that as dawn broke over the city, painting his bedroom in shades of gold and rose. Outside, I could hear the sounds of normal life resuming. Traffic, voices, the distant wail of a siren heading somewhere else. My father was gone, scattered to some corner of the country where he'd have to live with his choices. Luca would survive, but would carry the scars of his betrayal, both physical and within the family. And Dante and I, we were here, battered but whole, having survived a night that should have destroyed us. 3 weeks ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was loved by one of the most dangerous men in the city, and I'd walked through gunfire to get to him. 3 weeks ago, I'd had nothing. Now I had everything that mattered. What happens now? I asked. Dante's hand stroked my hair slowly, methodically. Now we rebuild. I clean up the mess with Luca, shore up the family's position, make sure everyone knows that touching you means death. He pressed a kiss to my forehead. And then, when things settle, I'm going to marry you. My heart skipped. Is that a proposal? That's a statement of fact. His eyes met mine, intense and certain. You're mine, Elena. Forever. And I take care of what's mine. I should have argued. Should have pointed out that we'd known each other less than a month. That this was insane. That normal people didn't decide to get married after a shootout in a hotel penthouse. But nothing about us had ever been normal. Okay, I said. But I get to pick the dress. His laugh rumbled through his chest, and I felt it everywhere. Deal. The sun climbed higher, spilling warm light across the bed. Somewhere in the building, Marco was coordinating security. Somewhere in the city, life went on. But here, in this moment, there was just us. 2 broken people who'd found something whole in each other's arms. I'd chased him first, walked into his world with nothing but desperation and hope. But he'd fallen harder, deeper, with an intensity that had changed us both irrevocably. And maybe that was enough. Maybe love didn't need to be safe or sane or sensible. Maybe it just needed to be real. This was real. The blood, and the bullets, and the brutal honesty of 2 people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. This was real. And it was ours. I love you, I whispered against his chest. I love you, he murmured into my hair. More than anything. More than everything. Outside, the city glittered in the morning light. Beautiful and dangerous and full of possibility. Inside, in the arms of the man who'd become my entire world, I finally felt like I'd found home. Not in a place, but in a person. In him. 6 months later, the wedding was small. Just Marco and a few of Dante's most trusted men, my mother in a rare moment of clarity, and a justice of the peace who asked no questions. I wore ivory silk that moved like water, and Dante wore a black suit that made him look like every dark fantasy I'd ever had. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, gold, like the one he always wore, I saw his hands tremble. You're stuck with me now, I told him. Thank God, he whispered back. My mother cried during the ceremony, and afterwards, she touched my face and called me brave. You're like your grandmother, she said. Strong enough to love dangerous men. Maybe she was right. Maybe strength was knowing the danger and choosing love anyway. We honeymooned in his family's villa in Sicily, all ancient stone and olive groves and endless blue sky. Dante taught me words in Italian, and I taught him how to laugh without looking over his shoulder. We were still learning each other, still navigating the complicated reality of our lives, but we were learning together. Back in the city, Luca had been quietly removed from family operations, exiled to a minor territory where he could do no real damage. The family had accepted me with wary respect, recognizing that Dante's power had only grown with me beside him, and my mother's care facility sent updates weekly. She was stable, comfortable, sometimes even happy. I'd started taking classes again, business management. Dante insisted, said I needed something that was mine. And maybe he was right. Maybe I needed to be more than just his wife, more than just the girl who'd chased a mafia boss and caught him. But at night, when he came home smelling like smoke and danger, when he held me like I was the only thing keeping him human, in those moments, I knew exactly who I was. I was Elena Moretti, wife of a dangerous man, lover of someone who'd burn the world for me. And somehow, impossibly, I was happy, not despite the danger, not despite the darkness, but maybe, in some strange way, because of it. Because I'd spent my whole life being invisible, and Dante had made me seen, and that was worth everything. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our apartment, watching the city light up as dusk fell. Behind me, I heard the door open, heard Dante's familiar footsteps, his arms wrapped around me from behind, pulling me against his chest. "What are you thinking about? About how I walked into that lounge in the rain?" I said. How terrified I was, how desperate. Regret it? I turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that still made my breath catch. Not even for a second. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. And outside, the city glittered like fallen stars, beautiful and dangerous and ours. I'd chased the mafia boss first, but he'd fallen in love harder. And in the end, that had made all the difference. In the end, we'd saved each other,